Ever wondered what happens when a contract, a perfectly good deal, suddenly becomes totally impossible to carry out? Well, there's a fascinating legal concept for that. It's called the doctrine of frustration. And today, we're going to crack this puzzle together. So, how are we going to get to the bottom of this? We're going to start with a classic legal question. It's actually the best way to see how this whole thing works in the real world. You ready? Let's dive in. Okay, here we go. Which one of these is the real deal when it comes to the doctrine of frustration? Take a good look. Now, I'll give you a hint. 3 of these are really common myths, and only one of them is the right answer. Got one in mind? All right, let's find out if you nailed it. You know, what's funny is that sometimes the best way to understand what something is to first figure out everything it isn't. So that's where we're going to start, by knocking down some of the most common myths about frustration. Let's tackle option 3 first. This is the idea that frustration kicks in when something gets destroyed before the contract is even signed. Now, this is all about timing, and believe me, in law, timing is everything. And this slide really breaks it down. See, if a priceless painting burns in a fire before you sign the papers to buy it, that's not frustration. That's a whole other legal concept called mistake. It basically means the contract might have been invalid from the get-go. Frustration, on the other hand, can only happen to a contract that was perfectly valid when it was made, and then some crazy, unforeseen thing happened. So, option 3, definitely not our answer. All right, moving on. How about option 2, the idea that frustration is a tool to stop one person from just bailing on a deal? This kind of makes it sound like a weapon one party can use against the other, but that's not what's happening here at all. And this is the absolute key. Frustration isn't something one person does. It's not self-induced. It's got to be caused by some external event that's completely out of anyone's hands. We're talking about a natural disaster, a surprise war, or a sudden change in the law. It's an outside force that hits both parties, so it can't be a tool for just one side. And just like that, another myth is busted. And that brings us to our last myth, option 4. This one's interesting. It suggests that frustration has this one big blind spot, that it just doesn't work for contracts involving the sale of land. Is that true? Is there some special exception? Well, it turns out there's no special loophole here. The doctrine of frustration is actually pretty broad. It can apply to leases, to selling goods, even to personal service contracts, like a famous singer who loses their voice right before a world tour. And yep, in some very rare cases, it can even apply to the sale of land. So option 4 is officially a myth. Okay, so we've cleared away all the wrong ideas. We've debunked the myths. We know what frustration isn't. And by doing that, we're left with the one true principle standing. So, what is it? Let's take a look. And there it is. This is the heart of it. The doctrine of frustration is what happens when some crazy, unforeseen event swoops in and makes the contract impossible, illegal, or just so radically different from what everyone signed up for. You can think of it as the law's emergency escape hatch for when reality just completely changes the rules of the game. Which means, you guessed it, our correct answer was option 1 all along. And the 2 words you absolutely have to remember here are future and both. See, frustration doesn't go back in time and erase the contract. It just stops it dead in its tracks right then and there. And it releases both parties from any obligations they had from that moment forward. So that all sounds good in theory, but what does it actually mean? What happens in the real world when a contract is frustrated? Why does all this matter? It's really like a set of dominoes falling, and it happens automatically. First, you've got a perfectly good contract, but then, bam, some wild, unforeseen event occurs. The second that happens, the law steps in and the contract is terminated. It's not up for debate, it's a hard stop. And the result? All future duties for both parties, they just vanish. And this is the ultimate takeaway. This is the bottom line. The number of things either person still has to do under that contract becomes a big, fat 0. The slate is wiped totally clean from that point on. The deal is simply over, not because someone messed up, but because the world itself changed and made it impossible. But that leaves us with one last really crucial thought. The standard for frustration is incredibly high. It's not a get-out-of-jail-free card for a bad deal. So what do you think happens if an event just makes a contract harder or more expensive to complete, but not truly impossible? That's the fine line the law has to walk, and it's what makes this whole doctrine so powerful and also so incredibly rare.